Super Smash Bros. This series has got to be one of the greatest examples of a multiplayer party game experience out there. I mean, sure, it doesn't have the universal accessibility and understanding of something like the Jackbox Party Packs, but amongst people who actively play video games, I am certain that at least one iteration of Smash has become a staple in the party rotation. There's just such an appeal to this franchise that draws you in. Whether it's from the colorful, diverse, and ever-growing cast of beloved Nintendo characters, or from the frantic, chaotic gameplay that's at least simple enough for most people to wrap their heads around, there's a reason why this is one of Nintendo's biggest moneymakers. And now the most recent games allow for up to 8 people to play at once, making sure everyone gets a cut of the action, and leading to even more memorable moments to come. But what about those times when you don't happen to have friends?
I cased over the moon.
Want to, I don't know, play around? God, I love it when you talk to me like that. Well, don't you worry your pretty little head off, because these games have got you covered. With, a handful of little modes that, despite increasing in size and depth throughout the years, continue to feel more empty and less fulfilling, as the events that once filled your childhood mind with excitement and possibility now become nothing more than a series of checklists you drudge yourself through for the sake of justification and completion. And the most standard and traditional of these is, of course, Classic Mode. Now, this mode has never been a major selling point in any of these games, but it's become sort of a staple, with several of the titles trying to give it their own unique spin in order to freshen it up a little. And now we've reached the 5th, or 6th, I guess, iteration of Smash, and here is where I think Classic Mode has become more interesting than it's ever been. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, aren't I? Let's just start from the beginning and see how we got here. Smash 64. The one that started it all, and thus making it the cutest and most endearing title in the series. Now this game's classic mode is as simple as you can get, as it basically provided the general outline of how the mode is supposed to work in the future. Fighting your way through a set list of opponents up until you reach the final boss, much like how your traditional fighting games work like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. However, unlike those games where the final boss is your ultimate test against putting up with bullshit, Smash has a rather easy pushover of a recurring final boss, Master Hand. He's honestly not much more challenging than the rest of what you faced, and definitely doesn't hold a candle to the likes of M. Bison and Shao Kahn, probably because they came from real fighting games, while Smash is just a little baby boy's game. Something else it has in common with Street Fighter are the bonus stages, where you take a brief break from the typical action to perform little tasks like smashing a car or kicking barrels. This is where I feel Smash triumphs over other fighters. The game's controls and mechanics allow for them to come up with much more fun and interesting scenarios, like Break the Targets, for example, where you're given this little obstacle course filled with targets for you to, break. There's Board the Platforms, similar to Break the Targets, except a lot less violent and more suitable for developing children. Oh, if only little Johnny played this mode more. He could have become a successful gymnast instead of developing a violent, uncontrollable aggression that started from how satisfying and stress-relieving breaking all those fragile little targets used to be, leading him to obtain several felony charges for assault and destruction of property. And finally, there's Race to the Finish, the most boring mode in my opinion. Just a bland, uninteresting dive down a few floors and hallways. But the other two were pretty cool. My favorite part about these stages is just how the layouts and environments are different for each character, putting their specific abilities to the test. For example, I like how Link's and Samus's Board the Platforms seem to be a little more non-linear than the other ones, sort of representing their more non-linear series. At least I think that's what they were going for. Who knows? I might just be a big dummy who's reading far too much into this, but yeah. This was a unique experience to try with each character. Too bad I can't say the same thing about the rest of Classic Mode, as it's the same song and dance every time. You fight Link, a bunch of Yoshis, Fox, break the targets, Mario and Luigi, Pikachu, Giant Donkey Kong, board the platforms, a few Kirbys, Samus, Metal Mario, race to the finish, fighting Polygon Team, and finally Master Hand. It's that exact order for every character, and you know what, that's fine. It was the very first Smash game, and this was just a little extra mode they threw in to give us kids a little something else to do, so I'm giving it a pass here. On a funny side note, when I was a kid I actually used to be angry at the fact that Link was always the first opponent you fought because he was my favorite back then, and it felt like they were trying to say he was the weakest one. And, you know, with that recovery of his, he could be a very strong contender. Like, you guys think Little Max is bad now? Get a load of this. Now let's move on to Melee, which currently might be the most divisive game in the series, I think. I don't know, I feel like what's considered the most divisive game in the series tends to switch around a bit, but Melee might be a top contender at this exact moment. Some people love it, declaring it to be the absolute pinnacle of the franchise, and other people are sick of the ones who make this claim. However, I happen to be one of the people who kind of love Melee. Now, it definitely has its flaws, but even though I'm nowhere near the top level player, I do find it a ton of fun to watch as a spectator. And I feel it's still the biggest improvement over the previous entry that was ever made to the series. It's been said before, but the leap from the N64 game to this was just holy shit. But that's not what we're here to talk about, is it? Now, in terms of the basic setup, Classic Mode is not all that different from the first game. Every trek through this mode is going to put you through the same basic setup. Character Battle Double Battle subgame, Character Battle Giant Battle subgame, Character Battle Team Fight subgame, Metal Character Battle, and Master Hand. The one key difference is that, instead of it being in a set order like the previous game, the characters you end up fighting here are completely random, so you get a bit of a different experience every time. This tends to lead to much more interesting scenarios between the characters, like Bowser, Samus, and Peach teaming up to fight a giant Dr. Mario, for example. Now, this is something that I'm not exactly sure I'd like as much nowadays, but back when I was a kid, oh, I loved it. I remember I used to jot down all the characters I'd come across in a notebook, and afterwards would come up with the reasons and scenarios in my mind that led to, say, Ganondorf teaming up with Luigi to fight Captain Falcon and Falco in order to take over Captain Falcon's ship, or why Luigi would later betray Ganondorf and create an army of clones to take him out, all on Ganondorf's journey to confront Master Hand and prove that he was the superior villain. I was a pretty cool kid. Speaking of Master Hand, the boss with him is actually a little more interesting now. Not only does he have more attacks, but now he also has his recovering PCP-addicted brother Crazy Hand, who shows up after receiving a day pass from his rehab center. But the real best part about Melee's Classic Mode, the thing it has over every other game in the series, are the bonus games. Oh, yeah, the bonus games. They took the concepts from the first game and blew them out of the f***ing water. Break the Targus is back and better than ever, with more expansive stages and even more elaborate hazards, making each and every character feel extremely unique, and goddamn that music! Ooh, this is one of those songs I never really appreciated all that much as a kid. I mean, it was just another one of the background songs back then, but looking back at it now, oh, what a fun f***ing tune. No board the platforms this time, unfortunately, so it looks like little Johnny's fate is sealed. But on the bright side, Race to the Finish is actually cool now. Instead of just one goal, there are dozens along the way, and instead of just a bland series of hallways, it's a whole damn obstacle course, with branching paths and fun hazards, and now it's all about seeing how far you're willing to go before time runs out. And finally, there's Snag the Trophies! Oh, yeah, snag the f***ing trophies! Okay, this one's honestly kinda lame, but whatever. Now, I want to say I think Melee had some of the most interesting single-player content overall in the series, but that might just be due to nostalgia blindness, and plus this list is focusing on classic mode, so overall, Melee's, it was pretty damn good. Then we get to Brawl, and it's funny. Trying to wrap my head around how Brawl's classic mode worked is honestly more thought than I think I've ever given this mode in my entire life. It's kind of like in between 64 and Melee's. For example, the first fight is going to be Zelda related, but it could be anything from you versus Sheik to you versus Toon Link and Ganondorf with Sheik as an ally. The second fight will most likely be you against Giant Yoshi with Donkey and Diddy as allies. The third will be some combination of Pokemon and etc, etc. It begins to kind of diversify itself later on, but I don't know, I just remember finding this mode a lot less fun than I did in Melee. Whether that was due to me running into the exact same combinations over and over again, or because I was a little older and saw just how repetitive the mode really was, but yeah, I definitely played this a hell of a lot less. One aspect that was a straight downgrade was the bonus games. It's only break the targets for you, kid, and the mode itself has been incredibly neutered. Did you enjoy having all those unique layouts and visuals that made each character's stage feel special? Yeah, that was cute, but honestly it was a bit of a wasted effort. So instead we'll just come up with, let's say 5 different courses and just sprinkle a couple of them into a classic mode run. Is that good? So yeah, Brawl's was extremely forgettable, but honestly that's kinda forgivable. Because you know what it did have? The Subspace Emissary. Yeah, I know, I'm getting a bit off topic here, but I want to bring this up now because I might use it later. So Melee had a fun little adventure mode, and Brawl seemed hell-bent on taking it and injecting it with goddamn steroids, giving it these large, sprawling stages that were honestly pretty generic looking and tended to overstay their welcome. But they also had tons of unique enemies that were kinda weird and bland and also pretty obnoxious to fight. I mean, what can I say? Injecting yourself with steroids might increase your muscles, but at the same time it makes your little Goomba shrink. But you know what Subspace did have? Character. Not so much in terms of the enemies and stages, of course, but in the cutscenes. These scenes here are probably the most universally liked aspect of the entire game. For years we've had this large assortment of Nintendo characters, and here, we finally have a Smash game that takes full advantage of its roster, giving us tons of memorable moments and enjoyable team-ups. Like, literally, every single person I've ever talked to about Subspace mentions that they love the Samus Pikachu team-up, and characters like Wario, DDD, Diddy Kong, and Captain Falcon tend to shine in their portrayals. It also gave us the chance to get to know some of these characters a little more, like Lucas, for example. Hardly anyone knew anything about him before this game, but now, due to Subspace, we have a definable personality to pin on him. For all of Brawl's problems, and trust me, there are many, at the end of the day, at least it gave us this. Anyway, tangent over, let's move on to the 3DS. This game had a serviceable classic mode, much like how this was a serviceable Smash game, you know, before the Wii U version came out. It did something a little different by offering us this branching paths system. The route you were on would split up into 3 different directions, color-coded by difficulty, and you'd have to make a split-second decision depending on who you wanted to fight and how challenging you wanted it to be. I suppose this is a somewhat interesting mechanic, but to be honest, I don't remember caring about it all that much. Like, I would never think too hard about which path I wanted to take. I mean, they don't give you much time to make a decision, so I never really found the choices I made to be all that impactful, but it was at least an interesting attempt. This is also the game that changed how stocks work in Classic Mode. In the previous games, you could choose to have anywhere between 1 to 5 lives, and that's it, kid. Don't waste them. From this game on, though, they lowered the number of stocks to 2, but they'd also reset after each match. I honestly kinda like that a little more. It makes it feel like getting screwed over by items and stage bullshit won't have a lasting effect on your entire run. The new difficulty system is also pretty interesting, but I kinda hate how it automatically knocks you down a level every time you die. Look, I get it, it's a punishment for losing and all that, but it's a punishment that just makes continuing from that point feel entirely worthless if you're trying to access some of the higher level exclusive content. Speaking of which, Master Hand feels like he's barely even in this game. After a couple of hits, he mutates and transforms into a whole new boss, the Master Core. Now this feels like a final boss that's more akin to what you'd expect from a fighting game, And by that I mean it's got some bullshit. Multiple forms, all with ridiculous screen-clearing attacks, and yeah, this is probably the hardest that the end of Classic Mode has ever been, so that's pretty cool if you're into that. Also, no bonus games this time around. Ah well, at the rate they were declining in Brawl, I'm honestly pretty okay with that. Then we get the Wii U version, and... Oh no. God, just looking at this image makes me flaccid. I mean, what happened here? This just takes what little life the mode had left and just sucks it dry. Sure, it's random like Melee's, right? In fact, this is actually as random as the mode has ever been. But Melee still at least felt like a little journey you were going on, a little adventure. This, though, this is just sad. Just mindlessly dumping all the amiibos on the table and dragging them around, participating in increasingly inconsequential feeling battles. Now, if I had to put my finger on what the biggest problem with this mode was, I'd probably say it had something to do with the focus on large 8-player battles. They just feel so empty and meaningless. Not to mention, with all these characters fighting at once, why, that just increases your chance of losing to elements beyond your control. I mean, sure, you're able to pick your battles, so you can try to avoid doing large multi-man matches, but you can't escape from them. Sooner or later, the remaining characters are going to pile up, and oh, would you look at that, they all want to play in a match at the same time! Oh, lucky me! God, the choices I make on this board feel even less impactful than the differing paths from the 3DS game. Sure, they try to spruce things up a little by giving you a rival, some CPU opponent that supposedly grows stronger the more battles it fights, and at the same time will also increase the amount of rewards it gives upon defeating, but still, I don't care. Especially because these rewards have a chance of being kinda shit the more you play. There's also this laughably underwhelming intruder mechanic that I completely forgot about until recording footage. It'll mostly play out like, I guess I'll go fight Ryu on the pirate ship. Oh, okay, I guess I'm fighting Samus now. What a non-stop thrill ride of unexpected twists and turns. As for any positives, well, there's a new form to the final boss, with it being probably the closest thing we're ever going to get to a Subspace sequel. Except for maybe a Smash Run on the 3DS. It's only accessible on the highest of difficulty levels, and you know, I'm actually not sure if I ever bothered to play Classic Mode enough to reach this phase. Oh, no, there it is, I haven't. Now, is this the worst Classic Mode in the series? Well, it's definitely what comes to mind when I think of Classic Modes I didn't like, but, you know, I guess I certainly have thought about it more than the Brawl one, so I don't know, maybe. And now we finally arrived at Smash Ultimate, and look, this mode, it's not mind-blowing or anything, and it certainly has its own faults that I'll be getting into. But what they did with the Classic Mode setup is something I greatly appreciate. See, this game goes back to the linear set order like in Smash 64. However, the big difference here is that this time, each character has their own unique route that is specifically tailored to them. And I love this change. I mean, back when I was a kid in Melee, I used to come up with the stories behind the encounters in Classic Mode, and now look, that's something they thought about too. And there are some fun scenarios here, each one telling its own little story, and it's honestly a lot of fun to sort of fill in the gaps here and there, so I think I'll go ahead and describe a few of them to you so you see what I mean. Now, Mega Man's is the big one that people like to talk about, and yeah, it's pretty great. A whole series of battles that emulates his entire run through Mega Man 2, but there are some others I'd like to shed some light on. Bowser's is all about him becoming so infuriated by his multiple losses to Mario that he gets overcome by this blind rage, becoming so triggered by the mere sight of the color red that he relentlessly attacks anyone who wears it. I like to think that his very first battle, the one that's against a bunch of different Miis wearing Mario hats, was like some sort of nightmare he was having, being surrounded and tormented by a group of figures, all resembling the man he resents more than anything else in the entire world. And this is what initially sent him over the edge and all that. Donkey Kong's definitely tells its own little story. It starts with a typical day in the jungle for DK, palling around with Diddy, defending his territory from K. Rool, all that stuff. But then all of a sudden, Donkey Kong has this urge to travel to the big city. New Donk City, in fact. Why? I'm not exactly sure, but if I had to guess, I'd say it had something to do with him wanting to get his singing career off the ground.
Eddie, let me go back to my home. Without me, everything's gone wrong. Eddie, let me go back to my home. Let me put things back where they belong.
So DK, along with his supportive best buddy Diddy, catch a flight and slowly make their way through several different town and city locations until finally making it to their destination. Hey, what can I say? Monkeys probably aren't all that good with directions. But while Donkey Kong is out there trying to make his dreams come true, Diddy is left with no one to be the sidekick for. So he has a bit of a personal crisis and goes around desperately trying to be everyone else's sidekick, teaming up with them to take out the respective villains and all that. The Wii Fit trainers are on a journey to go persuade tubby characters to change their lifestyle. With their fists. I'm assuming this one probably hits a little too close to home for a lot of people who play video games, myself included. Oh, if only the Wii Fit trainers would barge into my life and beat the shit out of me until I lost some weight. That could be kinda kinky, I suppose. I might get something out of that. But good lord, look at K. Rool here. He's gotten so bad that they need to get the help of his doctor in order to try to get the message through. But King K. Rool is a proud man, and he takes pride in his girth. So much so that he challenges every other heavyweight on the roster in order to prove his superiority. Snake, he's a weapons expert, and wants to make sure his tech is up to snuff, so he goes around testing the merits of his equipment against all sorts of other fellow weapons users, no matter how ridiculous they may seem. Captain Falcon, though, he's the exact opposite. He's tired of getting outranged by projectiles and only wishes to take people on in close quarters hand-to-hand combat. Princess Daisy is quite possibly one of the most neglected and overlooked characters in the entire Mario series. For years, she's had to watch as all these new princesses and characters of royal bloodlines made their way into Smash, taking a spot she rightfully felt belonged to her. And now, finally, she just barely makes it in as an easy echo of Peach. So it's time for her to get her revenge on all these other princesses who probably think they're just so much better than her, even though they've never once talked about Daisy in any of their conversations. Cloud's journey is titled, A Ride? Not Interested. And there you go, it's all right there in the name. Cloud is not looking for a ride. So what does everyone try to do? Offer him a goddamn ride, of course! Look, guys, Cloud has motion sickness apparently, so leave the poor boy alone. Oh, and I gotta mention my main Ridley. His is all about being a dastardly space pirate, attacking and raiding other characters that own some form of spaceship. And I love it. Plus, it's got a couple of fights with Samus thrown in there for good measure. Except Ridley actually wins these, imagine that. But if I had to pick a favorite out of all of these, I'd probably go with Dark Samus's. I've actually watched a couple of these classic modes explained videos, and they all seem to miss the point of this one. I don't think this is supposed to be Dark Samus teaming up with Hilda, Violent Ken, and Waluigi. It's her infecting and corrupting the original characters, forcing them to fight against their allies, like she did in Metroid Prime 3 to the likes of Rundus and the other two. That's what makes this one so amazing, and why it's titled The Great Poison given form. The same darker character colors are used in Mewtwo's, where he's creating a little mind-controlled army out of his defeated foes in order to, I don't know, take on Master and Crazy Hand, I guess. Speaking of which, Smash Ultimate actually has some unique boss fights outside of the typical hand jobs. There's Giga Bowser, Beast Ganon, Marx, Dracula, Rathalos, and this guy.
Yay!
But yeah, that's pretty damn cool. I mean, they're not nearly as challenging as the Master Core was from the last game, but they're a hell of a lot more fun to fight. My only problem here is the same one most people seem to have, and that's how they're just not used enough. Sakurai must have been really afraid that fans have grown too attached to the old gloves, because they're still the end boss of over half of the roster. And sometimes it just makes no sense why they wouldn't use another boss. Peach's, for example, is all about her fighting back against villains attempting to kidnap her, and who's the one baddie who does that the most? So Peach ends with a fight against Giga Bowser, no-brainer, right? But nope, Bowser is just a normal fight along the way. Peach fights the hands, of course. All the Zelda characters' journey ends with fighting Ganon, so you'd think all the Kirby characters would fight Marx, but nope. Why not? I know this is a pretty inconsequential complaint, but I seriously want to know what the specific thought process behind that decision was. What made the team decide, yeah, let's not have DDD fight Marx, and just fight the hands instead? There are still some pretty fun boss scenarios, like Luigi ends up fighting Dracula at the end. Like, come on, more shit like that, please. Sometimes it doesn't even conclude with one of the bosses, like Bowser ends up fighting a Metal Mario and Bayo fights a giant Palutena. I do honestly prefer this over the hands because, well, at least it feels more unique and fitting with the route's theme. While I'm bitching about things, I'll just say the one other aspect of Classic Mode I find lacking is the bonus game. Yeah, they decided to give us one here, and it honestly feels a little half-assed. Just a really short, lackluster race to the finish while collecting as many of these orbs as possible. It's a little disappointing, but I honestly don't care that much. Like, yeah, it would be cool if they had something along the lines of break the targets from Melee, but at this stage of the series, it's nothing I'm losing sleep over. Okay, that was a lot of negative there. So why is this my favorite Classic Mode in the series? Well, that's because I think it brings something to the table that Smash could always benefit from, and that's a bit of character and personality. Now, don't get me wrong, the series does a pretty good job at expressing little bits of characterization in things like their idle animations and taunts, but I do think it's something we can use a little more of. Smash has the benefit of having, quite possibly, the greatest roster of playable characters ever put in a game. But as far as how these characters would interact with each other, that's mostly been something left to be inferred by the players. At least other fighting games have things like character-specific intros and ending quotes. I think the main reason why Subspace Emissary is looked back on so fondly is that it threw us a bone here, letting us finally sort of see how these characters might play off of one another. That's one reason why I think these character reveal trailers are so memorable. Not only are we getting an anticipated new fighter, but the cherry on top is getting to see all these little moments like Samus annoying Little Mac, Ridley murdering Mega Man, Luigi freaking out in Castlevania, or King Dedede pulling a sick prank on the Kongs. Ever since Brawl, Sakurai has stated that he doesn't want to do another adventure mode with cutscenes like Subspace, because the internet exists so people are going to watch them there, and, that's fine. It's disappointing, but it's his choice. I guess a big reason why I love Classic Mode in this game so much is because it feels like sort of a stand-in for what Subspace gave us. I mean, sure, there's World of Light, but that's less focused on the game's specific roster and more broadly focused on the entire history of Nintendo and other companies. We do get that opening scene, and don't get me wrong, that was pretty fun. But after seeing it in the Direct, deep down I had a feeling it would be the only scene like that in the game. With Classic Mode, though, it's much more focused on the individual characters you play as. And I'll admit, imagining how every adventure started and picturing what must have led up to each individual fight, well, it sort of made me feel like a little kid again, I don't know. Look, one last thing. People who know me in Smash know that I'm not exactly one to step outside of my little comfort zone of characters too often. I mean, if I'm having fun with a select few, why should I bother throwing in a character I'm gonna have less fun with, right? But this mode here gives me enough incentive to make me actually consider playing as characters I would normally never touch. And not because I'm forced to, like with World of Light, but because I'm genuinely curious to see what the route has in store. And I don't think I felt that way with Smash in a long time. Actually, this entire video's been a lie. Smash Ultimate does in fact have the worst Classic Mode in the entire series, and it's for one specific reason. They cut out those 5-second little ending videos that went all like da 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 ba 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 ba. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, why not give it a like? And subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. And hey, if you wanted to share the video too, I mean, that'd be pretty cool. Also, I actually have my own Twitter account too. And I'm actually starting to use it a little more, so hey, go ahead and give me a follow, if you'd like. The link will be in the description. That's all. Have a good one. Oh look, if it isn't Isabelle. Isn't she so cute? What a precious little darling. Nobody says that about Ridley. Let's watch that one again, but slowed down a bit, shall we? Oh, here it comes. It's winding back, and look at that. Oh, did that hurt Isabelle? Oh, poor puppy. God, I'm such a fucking dork.